Chapter 75, Surviving Winter 8. It didn't seem to get any better. After working as a head maid for several months, Belle concluded that although her salary had certainly improved, the scope of responsibilities that came with the pay increase was excessively wide. Wasn't the position of chief in charge of the Ophelius Hall, a critical facility, acknowledged within the academy as a rank akin to the elders? Thanks to that, aside from her salary, there were a tremendous number of benefits. For starters, the uniform was so splendid and dignified that it overflowed with authority, individual work and living quarters were provided, and there was no need to do any rough work. Moreover, there was the matter of social perception. Acting as the head over the maids of Ophelius Hall meant that even the noble residents would treat her with a level of deference, as they heavily relied on the services provided during their regular lives. Nevertheless, Belle Meyer sighed deeply. The former senior maid, Belle Meyer, was a hands-on practitioner. Now, as a manager, she was not involved in maid-like work at all. Although she claimed to be a maid and donned the outfit, she never really did any maid's work. If she tried to handle a kitchen knife for preparing ingredients, the youngest maid would rush out to grab it away, claiming she would handle it. If Belle attempted to collect laundry, the laundry responsible maid would pale and dissuade her. She couldn't even understand her head maid uniform to begin with. Adorned with fancy rose-patterned accessories and festooned frills everywhere, she wondered how anyone was supposed to work in such attire. The role of the head maid ultimately proved to be no more than a front madam representing Ophelius Hall. It didn't take long for her to grasp this fact. Just like in high-end restaurants where the most experienced chefs aren't actually cooking, something of a similar feeling applied here. The reasons behind the former head maid Ellis not getting much involved in the practical operations began to make sense. With such elevation in rank, this position could no longer be truly called a maid. Her workday consisted of welcoming important visitors to the Ophelius Hall, inspecting the cleanliness during inspections, and monitoring and correcting the posture of the maids. Administrative tasks such as organizing documents for reports to the academy were also part of the job. Young and advanced in her position, one would normally swell with pride. However, Belle Meyer sighed as she crossed the corridor. It just didn't seem to fit her nature. Above all, she was more comfortable with hands-on maid work and found it more satisfying. Not particularly ambitious by nature, the role left her feeling quite hollow. She had never envisioned herself overseeing the dormitory personnel, inspecting the conditions, directing work, and maintaining discipline among the maids who were constantly watchful of her. The reason Belle Meyer was able to serve long-term was simply because she enjoyed bringing out the flavor in cooking, took pleasure in washing laundry immaculately, and found a certain fulfillment in assisting students overly concerned with their academy lives. She wasn't cut out for brandishing authority amongst the strictly disciplined maids. Rather, she liked the satisfying job of waking up a student who slept in, even helping tie their hair up. Have the lists for the new students arriving been finalized? Yes. Terry Renuel, Wade Clamore, Tanya Rothtaylor, Kylie Eckner, Clarice, Haig McHall, and Master Drake make a total of 7. Quote, Belle internally nodded at the memorization skills of the secretary maid who had accurately recited the new arrivals. In Ophelius Hall, given that the number of admittants was not high, it was standard for the maids to know each of the academy students intimately. There are still a few days left for the freshman class assignment tests, so most have not yet undergone the admission process. Miss Tanya was the first to arrive yesterday, and if the notification is correct, she should be arriving sometime today. As Belle listened to the secretary's report and strode forward, she encountered a student walking in from the opposite end of the corridor. Calmly settled white hair adorned with abundant gold threads, the attire was neat and imposing, indicative of the son of a commander who once ruled the northern border territories. His name was Wade Clamore, a new student at Sylvania Academy highly anticipated to secure the top position in his class. Customarily, the head maid would personally welcome new arrivals to Ophelius Hall. Yet, seeing Wade already present without having been informed beforehand, Belle couldn't help but feel a bit of embarrassment. Good day. Quote, Wade greeted her with a polite bow, to which Belle hastily reciprocated. I apologize for not notifying you in advance. I was originally supposed to arrive this afternoon, but my schedule advanced, so I arrived earlier than planned. Quote, oh, my, I haven't properly prepared to welcome you, and you've seen such a sorry state. Quote, no, it's my own fault for arriving unannounced. Quote, Wade inclined his head slightly again. The actual site of Ophelia's Hall, which I've only heard of in rumors, certainly lives up to its reputation. Clearly, the facility is impeccable thanks to the veteran staff. Quote, it also helps that it hasn't been long since it was renovated. Please, speak comfortably, there's no need for honorifics. Quote, no. As a freshman just entering, it is only right to extend the minimum courtesy to someone who is always busy managing this Ophelia's Hall. After all, I'll also be relying on your services, how could I treat you like just any other maid? With those words and a gentle smile, Wade's demeanor was somewhat uncomfortable to Belle. Ever since she was promoted, everyone around her seemed to use honorifics exclusively. You've arrived early. Most students won't start taking residence until the following week. Quote, I wanted to get a feel for the school environment in advance, and moreover, it's important to pay respects to Princess Phenia beforehand. Quote, Wade smiled warmly, adjusting his sword sheath with the emblem of an eagle and lion engraved, a symbol of protection from the Chloral royal family. Given that most of my family serve in the central army of the royal household, it's only proper that I pay my deepest respects to Princess Phenia, the star of the Chloral royal house. Quote, his outspokenness was significant. It wasn't sarcasm but a natural attachment to them. To Wade, who grew up in a military family, loyalty was as innate as limbs, appearing almost zealous. Am I the first among the new residents of Ophelia's Hall? No. Among your peers, Miss Tanya has already taken residence. Quote, is that so? The other person has yet to arrive, perhaps I will see them during the class assignment tests. Quote, that person, you mean? There was no need to further clarify who he spoke of. Belle intuitively knew. This girl was among the most exceptional of the new students. Under the patronage of the Telos order, revered by a countless number of worshippers, the girl was the sect's beating heart. It was difficult to even speak casually to her, a presence that made people swallow their words. Asterisk. Plates crashed and meals spilled over. A worm was found in the soup served by the maid from the Rothtaylor family. A young boy with golden hair flashed anger in his eyes. Standing silently beside him was a maid who was slapped across the cheek. When he demanded to see the person responsible, the kitchen attendant came forward immediately. The boy, seeming much older than his years, grabbed the attendant's cheeks and dunked his face into the still warm, spilled soup. While wiping his soup-soaked shoes against the attendant's apron, the boy berated him. The boy's sister sat quietly at her seat, simply continuing her meal. While practicing swordplay, the boy suddenly called over the gardener and started to beat him with a wooden sword. Upon asking why, the boy retorts that it's part of his training and to endure it. When the gardener cried out in pain and suffering, the boy admonished him, asking how he would feel if his sword training as the upcoming head of the Rothtaylor lineage was interrupted. The gardener fell silent, taking pleasure in flagellating the plump, sluggish gardener with the wooden sword. The boy's lips curled up, seemingly enjoying a peculiar excitement. He knew well enough that he lacked talent in swordplay and that he wasn't sincere enough in his training to practice so zealously. He simply reveled in beating the servant. The girl reading in the corner of the garden had no choice but to watch and remain complaint-free. Her father spent his time occupied with official duties in the imperial city. Upstanding family elders had given up on the boy and merely whispered among themselves. Since the noble Lady Arwen's passing, this boy had turned into a little tyrant, and this manor was his kingdom. On his 15th birthday, the lavishly decorated house bustled with feasting. He was satisfied with the gifts prepared by servants who demonstrated forced loyalty, unbothered by the falseness of the celebration. Seated with an elbow on the table and a chilling smile, the boy stomped and shattered a gold amulet, a collective gift from the servants, under his foot. Laughing heartily at the shocked expressions of the servants, he sneered. Then he turned to Tanya and said, "Look at that. Did they think I'd genuinely be happy with a gift from people no better than the dirt on the floor? Or did they think such false flattery would put me at ease?" And with that, he kicked over the banquet they'd spent all night preparing and destroyed the decorations. And still laughing, he said, "My birthday is still 5 hours away. I want a splendid celebration, so prepare a proper birthday party from now." Quote, looking at Tanya, who was quietly quivering but trying hard to hold back, he spoke. "Do you have a complaint? Do you feel attachment or pity for those who are no better than tools? It seems you aren't fully a noble yet." And then he whispered in Tanya's ear nastily. "I suppose you see me as trash, don't you? Your patience is impressive, to hold back from rolling your eyes in contempt. It's truly remarkable how you've learned to socialize and sense others' needs. But, living together for so long, it's inevitable to notice. You don't consider me fully human, do you? So, what will you do? Can you do anything? Will you kill me? With Arwen gone, if I were to die, you would take over the inheritance, wouldn't you? Well then, try it out. Here, take this ornamental dagger. Plunge it into my chest. Go on, just like this, I'll place it in your hand." Quote, the boy placed the dagger in Tanya's trembling hand and guided it to his chest. With a push of force, the boy's breath could be snuffed out instantly. But the boy knew. No strength would be put into that hand. If she truly killed the boy, no one understood better how grave the responsibility would be than this girl. It was merely a demonstration of status. Tanya's trembling hands loosened, and she dropped the dagger. The boy with the golden hair looked down at the fallen dagger and then burst into loud laughter. After his fit of laughter subsided in an instant, he looked down at Tanya again and said, "Thank you." Quote, quote. The chirping of sparrows resonated several times in the morning-lit northern forest. The boy was surprised that the necktie pin Tanya gave him was of such high quality, but considering her origins, such a gift would hardly be a burden. "Strictly speaking, I'm currently in a position of banishment. It's kind of you to go this far for someone who's not even your brother." Quote, Tanya had something else on her mind, or maybe she was thinking of old times, and she was hesitating and trailing off in her speech. "I'll make good use of it. I'll start wearing it to school from next semester." Quote, I pulled out 2 wooden mugs to brew some herbal tea, setting the water to boil. When I opened the storage chest, I found that the herbs were nearly depleted. In this world where I've been left penniless, she may be the only person I'm connected to by blood. Considering she doesn't seem too hostile towards me, there's no reason to skimp on hospitality. Well, since she's of noble birth, it's not like a simple cup of tea would impress her much, but it's the thought that counts. What are you standing there spaced out for? Come and sit by the fireplace. Quote, why yes, I will. Quote, she moved towards the campfire with quick steps and, with wide eyes, looked around the camp. Amongst various sights, the first thing to catch her eye was Lucy, sprawled out sleeping by the fire. This child, who is she? Ah, her, don't worry about her. She's just a visitor who pops by from time to time. Hey, make some room. Don't just stand there. Quote, Lucy rubbed her eyes a few times and lazily shifted to the side. Tanya watched with a look of curiosity but refrained from prodding further. I handed Tanya a mug filled with the herbal tea. She took muck, still seeming a bit tentative. I hear you've been visiting other academies to get a look around. Have you met anyone interesting? Ah, yes, I've heard a lot about you. About me, there aren't many that know me well enough to talk. Who? Someone like Zix. Ah, yes, I've met Senior Zix too. I sipped my tea, tilting my head in thought. Beyond Zix, my social circle was fairly predictable. The peer I could call a close friend would probably be Yenica. Tanya choked on her tea, hastily pulling the cup from her lips. She brushed her hair to the side, nodding with a subtle tremble. Ah, right, Yenika's kind, isn't she? Out of the people I know, she's probably the nicest and most well-meaning. Quote, yes, she's really kind. She's truly, incredibly kind-hearted. For real, her sudden enthusiastic praise of Yenika was rather unnatural. When I asked why, she rapidly shook her head and continued. Further, it's not just kindness, she is also incredibly powerful. High-ranking fire spirit. A lizard as big as a house. Tossing servants around like toys. Instead of ignoring someone's response, she kindly and elegantly encourages them to work hard in school life. Breathe while you talk. Quote, a trivial curiosity then crossed my mind. Did you actually see her summoning high-ranking spirits? Normally people avoid calling such spirits due to the high magical energy cost. Quote, I didn't see it. I really didn't. It's all in my imagination. People said high-ranking spirits look like that, so I just made it up creatively in my head. Please don't misunderstand. No need to deny it so vehemently on such a trivial story. After acknowledging her explanation, I looked over Tanya again. Clutching her mug tightly and casting her eyes down, her demeanor was less confident than I expected. The Tanya Roththaler I knew was much more arrogant, always carrying herself with unshakable self-assurance. Something felt off, and the more I contemplated, the more my judgment seemed askew. I had imagined a good life in the manor for her, but perhaps that conjecture was too far-fetched. After all, it was hard to believe that the pathetic third-rate villain Ed Roththaler hadn't planted any ill feelings in Tanya. Her anxious demeanor was evidence of that. Hey, Tanya. I was quite pathetic back in the mansion, wasn't I? I regret a lot, and while I can't undo everything, I've been trying my hardest, so don't view me too harshly. I've already been punished and disgraced because of those sins. Quote, Tanya Roththaler is nothing more than a villain in Act 3, Scene 3, there just to highlight the nobility of Princess Phinia. Not just because all Roththaler characters typically serve as villains, but by the very nature of the script, they're doomed to be expendable. I've heard you want to be the student council president. I support your ambition. I may not be of much help, but I know you're always trying, so be strong. Quote, despite what I was saying, I already knew. Tanya could never defeat Princess Phinia. The support from the entire Academy for Phinia was overwhelming, something no competitor could overturn. Even though the princess herself had not yet announced her candidacy, once she joined the campaign, the other contenders would simply be washed away like the outgoing tide. It was regrettable but inevitable. However, Tanya Roththaler was the only kin I had the chance to interact with in this detached world. The value of blood relations in this foreign land is indescribable. Sure, there was still time before Tanya would exit the scenario. Her early departure made it all the more poignant to grow attached. Having shared my thoughts, I observed her as Tanya's eyes were wildly flickering. Quote ellipsis question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark quote. It was as if she couldn't understand what was happening, reflective in her bewildered gaze. I decided it was best to remain silent rather than continue speaking. 2. Build a storage shed. 3. Expand the cabin. 6. Improve my dark arts to the 3rd level. 7. Acquire special archery skills. As my holiday objectives dwindled, only 4 remained. After Tanya left, I spread the magical artifacts and materials I had received on the camp floor. Comparing them with the list Lortel had provided, there was indeed a considerable amount. If I hold myself up in the secret library to focus solely on dark arts, it seems many useful items would be forthcoming. After the upcoming freshman class assignment exams, concentrating on the dark arts might be a good decision. Also, I need to keep up with combat skills. My proficiency in that area lags behind others. Considering the limitations of my physique, it might be more efficient to selectively master the truly vital skills. Of all the archery skills, Magic Arrow is one I definitely want to acquire. If I can shoot arrows infused with magic, the endless chore of arrow maintenance becomes unnecessary. The process of retrieving each arrow, maintaining the heads and shafts, is labor-intensive. This is a major reason for my reluctance to use a bow in hunting. Even though I've forced myself to practice archery to improve my skill proficiency, it will suffice to master magic arrow so I can cease bow training. Combining it with elemental or spirit bindings should be straightforward. Nevertheless, this winter might prove to be a turning point for growth. As tough and cold as the season is, spring will eventually come. I sat among the trees, exhaling beneath the tall canopy. It's time for the freshman class assignment tests. A section that never gets assigned even a single student, unfair, but the test is still the test, and I have to oversee it diligently. After all, as a scholarship student of the academy, most of my duties aren't particularly crucial. The important tasks were mostly handled by Assistant Professor Claire or Anise. I just need to do my assigned job well. It's cold. I wish spring would come soon. Asterisk. Regardless, nothing feels quite right to me. Everything is riddled with questions, Ed being the most baffling of all. Tanya crossed the Ophelius Hall corridor deep in thought, but her mind was a mess, unable to sort anything out. She had seen Ed's upbringings up close, growing up alongside him. There's no way that tyrant who was expelled could have so easily mended his ways. A person's nature doesn't change so quickly. However, his gentle reassuring of Tanya had almost convinced her to trust in the familial bond in the spur of the moment. Yet, even if everyone else believed in him, Tanya would never easily do so. She had seen firsthand his vile nature for many years. As she crossed the Ophelius Hall corridor, the memory of last night's vision chilled her. Under the crescent moon, casting Osri's light over the center of the northern forest, stood the spirit master Merylda and her sacred tree. When lambasting Ed in front of her, Tanya nearly burned to death by a real impact from the fiery lizard. She likely didn't intend to actually kill, but the sincerity of the angered girl convinced Tanya. At least that spirit master girl genuinely trusts and follows Ed. Considering the Ed she saw earlier, it didn't seem too far-fetched, yet it still felt strange. He wasn't an actor, and true colors often show after a year or so. Still, the way he earned people's trust seemed exceedingly unnatural. For now, I need to rest in my room, and sort out my thoughts. Ever since I arrived in Sylvania, I've been lost. This won't do. Taking the time to think things through slowly is paramount. Taking a deep breath, Tanya tried to regain her composure. She's been disconcerted and confused since arriving in Sylvania. She must restore her calm. Repeating this to herself, she was about to enter her room. Whoosh, whoosh. The sound of fluttering robes. Turning her head, she saw a petite girl stumbling through the corridor. It was a familiar face from the camp. At a glance, she seemed especially close to Ed. The girl's long white hair trailed along with her body movements. She cut across the hallway in her oversized uniform, pressing a witch's hat down on her head, before grabbing the doorknob to the room next to Tanya's. Evidently, she's returned from being scolded by Ophelius Hall's maids. There's a discernible lack of confidence. For a resident of Ophelius Hall with such high status, it's somewhat pitiable that she can't command even a single maid and is easily influenced. Her appearance speaks volumes, with the disheveled uniform exuding a lack of elegance. There's no grace to be found. As Tanya felt the girl's gaze upon her, the girl hesitantly turned her head. Then, with the same stumbling steps, she approached and patted Tanya's shoulder as she stood on her tiptoes. If there's anything troubling you, speak up. Quote, Tanya's eyebrows raised slightly at the casual remark, and the girl opened the door and entered the adjacent room. Quote, quote, regardless, she's the occupant of the room next door. Perhaps Tanya should at least learn her name. She glanced at the nameplate on the door. There hung a gold nameplate, signaling the top student of her year. Room 302, Lucy Merrill. Quote, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, quote. Tanya stood there, utterly perplexed. It seems it would take some time to adapt to Sylvania. Certainly, none of this was Tanya's fault. If you want to have more videos like this, then like and subscribe to my channel, and have a nice day or evening or night. I will see you soon.